夠人又夠鐘。
Good afternoon, members. We've already formed a quorum. It is also time to start, so I call the meeting to order. First of all, confirmation of minutes of a previous meeting. On the 16th of April, we have already sent out the draft minutes for the previous meeting, inviting your comments. We haven't received any, so can we confirm the minutes of the previous meeting? Any comments? No? Then minutes confirmed. And then information papers issued since the last meeting. We haven't got any. And then date of next meeting and items for discussion. We're going to hold our next meeting on the 19th of May. As to the items for discussion next time, why don't we get the administration to join us at this juncture? So please invite the team from the administration to join us.
Hậu.
We can go to the list of outstanding items for discussion. Yes, welcome. Yes, please wait for the team from the administration to join us so that we can discuss the agenda for the next meeting. I would like to welcome the following guest speakers. Ms. Agnes Low, Assistant Commissioner for Census and Statistics, Labour. Ms. Wenda Yu, Senior Statistician, Labour. Also from CNS Department, Ms. Mabel Lee, Assistant Commissioner for Labour. Mr. Desmond Howe, Principal Economist, Economic Analysis and Business Facilitation Unit, FS Office. Now, we would like to talk about the agenda for the next meeting. The administration has come back with two proposals. Have they got it? No? Then please have it distributed. First of all, the latest position of the employment services of the Labour Department as well as labour safety in the year 2014. Any questions? Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question. In year 2010, Dr. Peng Pei Chow asked a question concerning the creation of employment opportunities on, the mental impairment arising from occupational injury. Will this be followed up? Mr. Chairman, we have proposed two items for discussion at your next meeting. As to the one referred to by the honourable member, that is the fifth one in the list, that is mental impairment arising from occupational injury. When an employee completes his sick leave, we'll also try to see if any psychiatrist help will be needed in the case of mental impairment arising from occupational injury. We'll also give assistance in assessing the compensation. We will monitor the case closely and deal with the relevant cases. We have worked through different publicity channels and activities to make sure that employers and employees understand the possibility of mental impairment arising from occupational injury as well as the compensation related. Now, we believe that the current approach is adequate, but if members have got other views, we're happy to consider them. Deputy Chair, are you happy with the reply? Yes, I do understand the answer, but perhaps I need to understand more about the background. I think in overseas countries, sometimes you may work briefly in a particular trade or occupation, but then the mental impairment may be long-lasting, and then employers might not have given adequate help. But unfortunately, an employee may be affected throughout his life, and it is really sad. Maybe at that time, Dr. Panpechio has also got this in mind. If you would like to raise it again, you may always do so anytime. So for the agenda next time, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yen, you referred to two matters. I think we always visit such topics every year. There isn't anything new in particular concerning the employment. And then for occupational safety, of course, we're concerned about the accident rate. Recently, the Labour Advisory Board has had very heated arguments about the importation of foreign labour. So I would like to know about the latest position. In particular, some LB members have told us that they've been invited to indicate whether they are for or against. Now they are asked to give reason, and it has to be done in writing. And in addition to the MTRCL, for major construction sites, there will be a one-off arrangement. That is, once a worker has been admitted into Hong Kong, then the worker can be deployed to different construction sites. In the past, a foreign worker has to be attached to one single construction site only. In other words, the foreign workers will become permanent workers. So I'm not sure about the latest position. There is some dissatisfaction among the LAB members, but I'm not sure about the extent. So I think it's better if we can have a discussion. Is the government ready to have a discussion? Well, for the supplementary labor scheme, all along it is the LD that is responsible for implementing it. Every case has to be vetted vigorously by the Labour Department, and the LB has been invited to give comments. It's up to the government to approve or otherwise of the application. As to the case of the construction industry, that's being steered by the Development Bureau, but I can certainly refer Mr. Lee's point to the Development Bureau. It has already been discussed at LAB meetings. Can the Development Bureau also attend our meeting to give us the latest picture? We want to know about the new arrangements, like the number of workers to be admitted and whether the LAB agrees with the arrangements. Other members? Yes, Mr. Tang. I agree with what Mr. Lee has proposed. Let's see when we can have a discussion. Well, the Development Bureau is proposing a new arrangement for the purpose of the public works projects. Even if we can't have it done for May, I'm sure we can do it in June. Yes, maybe you can reflect the point to the Commissioner of Labour or the Secretary for Labour and Welfare. So there's this proposal from members, and please check when we can have a discussion. If necessary, please get the Development Bureau to be represented as well. All right? This case that takes us to the agenda for today's meeting. First of all, major findings of the 2014 Annual Earnings and Hours Survey. The administration has already submitted a paper. Our secretariat has also prepared a background brief. Both have been sent out to members. And first of all, I'd like to give the floor to the administration. Please explain the findings to us. Who will walk us through? Yes, I will start. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. we are here to talk about the survey results of the 2014 Annual Earnings and Hours Survey. Before I embark on the survey results, first of all, let me talk about the methodology. Well, it is useful for the purpose of revising the statutory minimum wage rate. So we try to cover all the business entities, and then student interns, work experience students, and live-in domestic workers, as well as government employees, are being exempted under the minimum wage ordinance. Otherwise, all other employees are covered, and the survey period is between May and June. And first of all, we have a two-tier system. And first of all, we have chosen 10,000 business entities, and then we try to randomly select 60,000 employees for the purpose of the survey. Well, we would like to look at the monthly wage. When we gather the data, wage is defined in accordance with the employment ordinance. Basically, it covers 4 elements or 4 components. First of all, the basic wage. Second, commission and tips not of gratuitous nature, guaranteed bonuses and allowances, like meal allowance, etc., or a shift allowance. And but then end of year payment and payments in kind are not included. And then the 4th one will be the overtime allowance. We are referring to the total wage received by an employee in the month of survey. If they are paid for the rest day or the meal breaks not belonging to the work hours, that will still be counted. Well, for the distribution, we can see that the median wage is 14,800, and then there is an increase of 5.3% when compared with the same period in 2013. When compared with the inflation rate of 3.6%, according to the composite inflation rate, it is higher. And then for the 10th percentile, it is 8,000, and for the P20. For the 25th percentile, 10,500, an increase of 5%. If we are to look at a longer horizon, that is between 2010 and 2014, that is when we first introduced the statutory minimum wage, we can see that the wage increase rate has been higher than the relevant inflation rate. In particular, for the lower percentiles, we have seen an increase of 7.9% on average for the 10th percentile, and also 5.8% for the higher percentiles. And in fact, the relevant inflation rate was only 4.3% only. In the case of different occupations, well, for the low-income industries, retail, catering, property management, security, cleansing, and miscellaneous activities, well, all in all, their median wage it was 10,500, an increase of 5.5%. For others, the increase was only 2.4%. Again, when we look at the case between 2010 and 2014, and when we look at the average annual increase for the lowest paid industry, the rate of increase was 7.5%, significantly higher than the rate of increase for across the board, which was 5.8%. And then For male employees, an increase of 4.6%, and for female employees, similar, 4.5%. And then when we looked at the average rate of increase between 2010 and 2014, on average for the monthly wage rate for the male employees, an increase of 6.2%, slightly higher than 5.7% of the female employees. But then the difference isn't that huge. And then what about the age distribution? When comparing 2013 and 2014 figures, for the age group 15 to 24, the rate of increase was highest, giving us 7.1%. For those aged 55 and above, again, there was an increase of 5.4%, slightly higher than the rate of increase for other age bands. For the period between 2010 and 2014, for those aged 55 and above, they received the highest rate of increase among all the groups. There was an increase of 7.9%, followed by the group 15 to 24, an average of 7.5%. For other age groups, on average, they had a rate of increase between 5.3% and 6.2%.
If we look at the breakdown under qualifications, those with lower qualification education, such as primary and above, secondary 1 to secondary 3, they would rise in media income register 6.3% and 4.5% respectively. If we look at the situation, the average increase from 2010 to 2014 for those with primary education or below, they registered the highest rate of increase, 8.3%. The next highest is those in the age group of in the qualification group of secondary 4 to secondary 7, 6.3%. For those with post-secondary education, the increase was just 4.1%. And let's look at the occupational groups, the breakdown under occupational groups. For non-skilled workers, it was 6.2%. And as craftsmen and related operators of machines is 6.5%. If we look at the period from 2010 to 2014, non-skilled workers also registered, elementary occupations registered the highest rate of increase, 9.3%, compared with managers, administrators, professionals, and associate professionals with the lowest rate of increase on average. During the period, it was only 4.8% for this group. And we also look at the hourly wage. Of course, when we calculate the hourly wage, we look at the definition in the minimum wage ordinance. And this is the formula. The numerator is the total wages minus wages for rest days, and also wages for meal break, which doesn't count towards the total working hours, divided by the total number of hours worked during the wage period. So if in accordance with employment ordinance or through an agreement between the employer and employee, then if the meal break is paid, then it's included in the calculation. The median hourly rate in 2014 is at $60 and 4.3% increase over the same period 2013. That is to say, 5% of our working population has an hourly rate of $32.1 as the hourly wage. For those who are earning a wage under the minimum wage, in 2013, the minimum wage rate was $30. 50,000 and 300 workers, 1.7% of the total. Lower than $31, 75,500, 2.5%. And we are going to introduce the latest minimum wage of $32.5 per hour. And there were 170,500 people earning that kind of wage. For those who are earning less than $40 per hour, there were 613,400 in 2014, or 20.7% of the total. And let's look at the breakdown according to occupations. In the May 4 occupations, property management, security and casing services, catering, miscellaneous of activities, and retail, they have the lowest rates, and they are defined by the minimum wage commission as a low-paid occupations. The median, compared with 2012 and 2013, it remained the same. The median wage remains the same. On the basis of the hourly wages, the highest are the education, public administrations, finance and insurance, power and gas supply, and professional science and technical activities. They are the four highest occupations in terms of hourly wage rate. For elementary occupations, the hourly wage rate is the lowest, $38. Next, service and sales personnel, $43. And the third lowest, the clerical support employees, $551.6. Machine operators, craftsmen and assembly line workers, 66.3%. Manager, administrators, professionals and allied professionals, $100. Again, the order is the same as in previous surveys. Apart from hourly rate, we also look at another piece of important information, and that is the working hours. Again, we follow the definition in the minimum wage ordinance, and we cover the employment contract, working hours, and also the agreement between the employer and employee as regards whether the meal break is also counted. We also included the overtime working hours worked under the direction of the employer. In 2014, for all employees in Hong Kong, the 25th percentile working hours was 40.6% per week. So it's 40.6 hours per week. It's the same as that for 2013 survey. Medium working hours, 44.3%. A small reduction of 0.7 hour or 1.5% over that in 2013. The 75th percentile is 51.4%. Again, it's a slight decrease of 0.3 hours compared with 2013, or a drop of 0.6%. So that's the overall situation. If we want to look at the situation with low-paid employees, retail sales, the number of hours has increased by a small number, 0.1 hour or 0.2%. Catering, the same. Property management, security and cleansing services, reduction from 52.6 to 51.9%, or 1.3%. Miscellaneous activities, 49 to 48.2, a reduction of 0.8 hours. That's all for my presentation, Chairman. Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. from CNSD. The floor is now open for members to raise questions. The first one to ask questions is Mr. Wong Kok Heng. How much time do I have? Let's see. We have 8 members who would like to raise questions. 9 now. So every member would get 4 minutes first. In the first instance, questions and answers. Please manage time properly. Mr. Wong Kok Heng, from the survey findings, the first impression I get is that frontline workers, jobs with high labor intensity or long working hours, they are getting lower pay. That's my feeling. So there are the disadvantage in the working population. The government should change its policy to help these vulnerable and disadvantaged workers. First, the government should consider having annual reviews of minimum wage rate. If we look at page 12 of the PowerPoint presentation, a big number of them, or 170,000 of them, are earning less than 32.5%, and they will get $32.5 per hour in May. Now you have a review once every 2 years. You are going to lag behind the actual situation. So according to the findings here, maybe shouldn't we have annual reviews of minimum wage rate? The government should be more positive and proactive about this. And also PowerPoint page 16, and that is the number of working hours as defined under the minimum wage ordinance, and there's a gray area here, and this is particularly so for the vulnerable groups, and I'm talking about vulnerable employees and who doesn't really have any bargaining power. In the bracket here, in accordance with employment contract or the agreement between the employer and the employee, the meal break hours, which is regarded as working hour, but the employees have no choice. They can either take their jobs or not. The government should do something about this. So 2 questions. Who would like to take this question? I'll defer to my colleague from the Labour Department, Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your 2 questions. First of all, whether we should have a system of annual reviews of the minimum wage rate. The Bureau and my department have explained our position. Let me repeat. According to the minimum wage ordinance, at least 1 review should be conducted every 2 years. This is a flexible arrangement, and it will benefit both the employer and the employee, because when there's a downturn in the economy, they would enjoy certain buffer. We would continue to keep things under review and consider the way forward. As for the number of working hours, last month the government gave a briefing on the review conducted into working hours. The timetable is that the relevant task force would submit a report to the government next year so as to inform the way forward by the government.
Mr. Lee Chek-yen, well, from the data, once again, it has been proved that the administration has been very mean by having a review once every 2 years. Table 12, for those earning less than $32.5, last year there were 170,000 of them. So for this year, certainly it will not be the same figure. You can assume that maybe 80,000 people will leave, and then you still have 90,000. So that's about 3% or so. In other words, comes the 1st of May, only 3 to 4% of the employees can benefit from the enhanced statutory minimum wage rate. So is it effective? In other words, $32.5 is a very mean figure. If you don't have a review once every year, then certainly it will be very harsh for the low-income earners. Please turn to another table and you see how miserable their lives are. Table 11 for the 5th percentile. Please look at the 5th percentile. So an increase of 3.5% only. In other words, they can't even catch up with inflation, which was 4% in that year. So you only got an increase of 3.5%. And please also look at the 25th percentile and the 50th percentile. Of course, for the 75th and the 90th, you may see that the increase is not as good. Now, for the lower income earners, they haven't got the adjustment of the statutory minimum wage. The labor market was tight, and we were supposed to have a favorable environment for pay increase. But then, instead of having a review once a year, we have got it twice. Only once every 2 years. So it is very bad for the low-income earners. Of course, the government will say that the purpose of introducing the legislation is to prevent extremely low income levels, but the government won't care as to whether the earnings can catch up with the inflation. The government won't care about the hardship of the low-income earners. So I'll just draw a conclusion without asking a question. Now I turn to my question for the Census and Statistics Department. I've read all the figures and I try to do one thing. I try to compare the working hours throughout the world. For OECD, there was this comparison of working hours in many cities, but we haven't got the figures for Hong Kong. For the OECD, Turkey ranks first. 47.9 hours, Korea 43 hours. That's the average working hours. And then with an annualized working hours, 1832 for Turkey, 2163 for Korea. So can you not sort of look at the case of the OECD countries? We're talking about the average working hours instead of the median working hours. I think Hong Kong must rank first throughout the world because for the figures from 2012, the average total working hours, according to the Census and Statistics, was 49. In other words, we must have ranked first in the world. So Census, please give us the figures so that we can compare ourselves with the rest of the world, including the annualized figures. Census and Statistics Department. I have got a figure with me, and this comes from this survey. For full-time employees, on average, the number of working hours on average has been 47.4 hours. That's for full-time. If we take into account all the employees in Hong Kong, it will be lower because there are 7% of them who are part-time, and so they have a smaller number of working hours. We'll go back and try to come up with the annualized figure. For the year 2012, the figure was 49. I don't know whether we were talking about full-time employees. So can you account for the difference? Well, why don't you talk about the picture in the past 5 years or the past 10 years so that we can compare ourselves with OECD as well as getting the analyzed figures. But you can see that Hong Kong has the longest working hours, 47.9 hours for Turkey, and then we are still higher than Korea, because we're 47.4, Korea 43. In other words, the most suffering workers can be found in Hong Kong. Administration. We'll go back to check. The working hours survey was only first started in 2009. We might not be able to go back 10 years down the road. Just now you referred to OECD. You said that the figure given was 49. No. The one you carried out in 2012, the figure was 49, and that's about wage and working hours. Ms. Low, would you like to give us supplementary information after the meeting? Next, Mr. Tan Ka-pyu. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to follow up on page 12, as other members have referred to. 255,000 in the year 2013, 170,000 in the year 2014. So we have got 85,000 less employees. So it means that the government has exaggerated the case as to the number of employees benefiting from the new minimum wage rate. So probably when it is implemented, there will be 70 or 80,000 employees earning less than $32.5. So in fact, if you don't have a yearly adjustment, then every time you will appear to be exaggerating the benefits. Having an adjustment every year will be good, but of course will be practical. We won't be getting a rate of increase of 8% every year. I think it is more realistic to have an annual adjustment. Now, the benefits have been much scaled down. Have you ever talked to the SMWC? Because the benefits will be sort of reduced as a result of the time lag. Secondly, for the standard working hours, I've been surprised. 2 years ago, we got a survey, and then we were concerned for male employees. In the year 2012, the working hours, when compared with the 2013 working hours, it went from 48 to 49 hours. But this year, the number of hours has come down quite significantly to 44.3 hours. How come that there has been a decrease in the median working hours? You may say that the real wage hasn't been affected, and then the working hours have been reduced. It would be a piece of good news, but I don't know whether there has been some manipulative intervention. Will the associations or the chambers of commerce be advising the employees not to fill in the voluntary overtime and involuntary overtime? It appears to us that for both the grassroots as well as the clerical staff, we haven't seen any relief in the long working hours. Could you give an answer? I'll try to answer the questions, and then for the effects of the statutory minimum wage, the FS office will give an answer. For working hours, as I have said, when we got the figures, we covered overtime requested by employees. So employees who work overtime voluntarily without the instruction of the employers, for all the time, well, the survey will not cover this kind of overtime work. So it isn't a matter of changes in the operation resulting in a change in the figure. In particular, for this year, we have also noted that the median figure has seen a decrease. Instead of 45, it has become 44.3 hours. The decrease is slight, but we've carried out an analysis. It has been found that in 2014, for some full-time employees, they worked slightly fewer hours, like those under 40. I think there's been an increase in the proportion when compared with the previous year. And then for longer working hours, like in the past, they worked more than 60 hours. So the latest survey has been found that the absolute figure as well as the percentage have come down. So when the two are put together, you can see that there has been a decrease in the median working hours. Mr. Hao, when the SMWC considered the rate, I think they were fully appreciative of the time lag. They took into account the economic situation, and they will also consider the downside risk as well as other concerns. So in a nutshell, if the economic situation is good, then of course the wage will increase more rapidly. And you can see that for those earning less than $32.5, the percentage will be smaller. I have to say that the SMWC will look at a basket of factors before coming up with a recommendation. So generally speaking, the percentage reflects the result, the outcome, rather than the factor to be considered. I think it is a piece of good news for us to see that there has been this change in the number of employees. If you would like to get a more detailed answer from the government, please keep your questions succinct and don't try to ask too many questions at the same time, because we are really limited in time, and I will restrict with the time limit of 4 minutes each. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just now, many members have said that every time we adjust the statutory minimum wage, the number of employees benefiting from the new rate has always been exaggerated. In 2013, it was said that 220,000 will be affected, but from this one, we can see that only 98,000, just half of them, were able to benefit. I think the same will be repeated this year. I think we can see that there's been exaggeration of the effects of the statutory minimum wage. And in fact, the figures do not tell the low level of the minimum wage rate. Please go to page 4 and page 6. Well, please refer to the sentence at the bottom of the page. When considering the average yearly increase between 2010 and 2014, the low-income earners on the whole got an increase of 7.5%. Sorry, 7. And there was an average increase of 7.5%, so on average. But then if you look at the statutory minimum wage, discounting 2010, the first year it was introduced, an increase of 7.1% in the first time, and then for this occasion 8.3%, so a total of an increase of 15%, an average of 4% per year. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But then on the face of it, there are 2 points. First of all, the rate of increase of statutory minimum wage is too low, so that it is tracking down the average rate of increase for the low-income earners. And then between 2010 and 2014, the average rate of increase, even for the low-income earners, on average, we have got 7.5%. How come that the SMW is only 4% or so? Does it show that the SMW is not adequate? Mr. Hao. As to the point referred to by Mr. Kwok, it is a matter of a comparison between 4 years. And in 2010, we didn't have the SMW. At that time, it was said that many low-income earners were making much less than $28 an hour. If we would like to make a comparison, whether we talk about 7.5% or 7.9%, it will be difficult for us to compare with the SMW. Before we got $28, there's no way that we could make a comparison. So there has been a lot of controversies concerning the comparison. For the sake of comparison, can't we have something for the average yearly increase in the year 2010 for the 10th percentile, say for example? I haven't got the figure with me, but perhaps we can look at the latest picture. On Sunday, the Secretary has mentioned this point. If we are to look at the General Household Survey findings, well, in the latest season, for the lowest 10th percentile, there has been an increase of 34.5%, even discounting inflation, an increase of 13%, vis-a-vis the pre-statutory minimum wage era. So there's been a significant increase in the growth of income.
Yeah. Mr. Poon Siu Peng, thank you, Chairman. Many members have asked questions, and I'm equally concerned about those issues. Let me refer members to page 8. That is the breakdown according to education qualifications. The rates of increase for those holding primary or below the education was better than those with post-secondary qualification. Well, the increase was 3.5% for post-secondary qualification. It was even lower than inflation. Is that correct? Have you looked into the reason why? And now on working hours, weekly working hours. Page 18 of the PowerPoint presentation. A comparison between 2014 and 2013. For the retail sector, it was longer. Catering, the same. So 54 hours per week. It's really long. The longer working hours, was it because of the booming retail trade and the good business that they enjoyed? First, on the question of education qualification, there was only an increase of 3.5% comparing 2013-2014 for those holding post-secondary education. On average, from 2010 to 2014, the average annual increase was 4.1%, but they really did poorer than other education qualification groups, because the minimum wage effect is lower on this particular group, and it has to do with the definition of minimum wage. Many of the people holding such qualifications are managers and administrators, and they have enjoy bonuses and non-guaranteed payment and allowances, such as profit sharing, bonus, and so on and so forth. So here, it cannot really actually reflect the increase in take-home pay. That may be one of the reasons. The second question is about the median working hours of the retail sector. There was an increase of 0.1 hour. It's a slight increase. We've looked into that. Maybe in 2014, the retail sector enjoyed good business, and there were more people employed in retails. And then there's a slight increase in the. There was a slight decrease in the ratio attributed to part-time workers. And that's why the medium working hours register a small increase. So in other words, the retail sector was doing well, but for other sectors, and because of the lack of significant change in the number of employees, that's why they had no increase. Well, they also have more workers, but the ratio taken up by part-time employees did not change a lot. Mr. Chen Kim-po, when you look at the definition of working hours, it means that the working hours under the employment contract or under the agreement, as well as overtime work under the instruction of the employer. So it doesn't cover voluntary working overtime. It's common in Hong Kong. Previously, the government said that the voluntary overtime working hours will not be covered because it's defined in the same way in the employment ordinance. But in many accountants and other service industries commonly have this problem of voluntary working hours. Are you going to change this to improve the definition? And for the low pay industry employees, the minimum wage is just 10,500. So these people have the longest working hours and the lowest pay. For example, in the catering industry, what can the government do about this? When I used to work in a shipping company, whenever it's about time to knock off for the day, the female boss will come out and sit down at a desk. Well, we have not been able to collect this data on voluntary overtime hours because we collect the information from the employers, and we have to adhere to the definition of the minimum wage ordinance. I understand the SMWC has conducted a survey covering 10,000 employees, and the actual working hours information on the actual working hours was collected, apart from those worked under the instruction of the employer. The survey also covered voluntary overtime worked. I believe when the report from the SMWC is out, you will know the picture more comprehensively. As for the situation with catering industry, I'll defer to my colleague from the Labour Department. The government has always been encouraging companies and corporations to adopt different forms of family-friendly policies so as to help the workers to have work-life balance. The Labour Department has also organized many activities such as seminars, publications, and special supplements in newspapers. And for the catering industry, we have a tripartite group involving the employers, the corporations, the employees, and the government. And we also involve management people to publicize the messages in this regard. This year, the Labour Department would step up publicity for the promotion of family-friendly practices. There will be newspaper supplements to publicize successful examples of corporations taking up or taking on board these policies so as to encourage more employers to follow suit? Mr. Chen Yunhan. First of all, on this report compiled by the Census and Statistics Department, I would like to ask the government to take note of it. For grassroots workers, but they have to make a living. In the workers in the retail and catering industries, they have long working hours. They get low pay. Faced with this situation, and given that the CNS department has published this report, I would like the Labor Department to answer some questions. Well, these statistics are not new. They used to be the same in past years. It's been said that we have a good gender pay equality, but that's wrong, because there's still a gap between the pay received by male and vis-a-vis female employees. So, Ms. Lee, how would you respond to this problem? What are you going to ask the EOC to do, and what about the doing something about the anti-discrimination or equal opportunities laws? Ms. Lee, on the situation with low-pay industries, in 2011 we introduced the minimum wage. One of the important objectives is to reduce the low pay situation. Now it has been implemented for 4 years, and we have seen actual results. If we look at the lowest 10th percentile, the rate of increase in the past 4 years, for the past 4 years, is 12.7% net of inflation. That's the actual increase. For those occupation with low pay, there is also some improvement. If I may refer members to PowerPoint page number 5, from 2010 to 2014, the median monthly wage registered certain growth year over year. The overall increase was 7.5%, which is higher than other industries. Of course, it would be even worse without minimum wage. But with minimum wage, it's not very good. If you look at page 9, it's just $10,000 for elementary occupations. Well, there was a Mr. C who insisted that he should work and not get CSSA. Yes, the rate of increase was not the highest, the second highest, 6.2%, but actual pay is just $10,000. If they don't work and get CSSA, they would get a higher amount. So the government should look at the idea of having annual reviews. Or maybe I can also get a question on the gender pay disparity. Well, because of my gender, I must allow this question. Why is it that for males it's 16,500, for females it's just 12,700? Mabel? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Chan. I think this is really about the statistics here. If I may, I would like to defer to the Ms. Low from the CNS department. Yes, there's pay disparity between male and female employees. We have to carry out detailed analysis before we can say whether there is equality of pay. Because in terms of education qualifications, females have lower qualifications than their male counterparts. And secondly, even though they may have the same education qualifications, they may work in different jobs. For example, for elementary occupations, if you work as a cleansing worker, it's not the same as working as a security guard. And it's not unique to Hong Kong that male employees get higher pay than female employees. In many countries, it is the same. For example, in UK, if you look at full-time employees of UK, the pay of males is more than 10% higher than females. Australia, the difference is some 19%. There are other factors affecting the pay levels.
Why didn't you refer to the case of Denmark and Finland? Sorry, Ms. Chen, time is up. Next, Mr. Leung Yu-chung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Indeed, from the figures, we get the impression that for occupations that have longer working hours, the pay is lower. So it is indeed a problem that we need to face and seek a solution. Otherwise, this will be repeated year after year. It isn't just for a particular year. For those workers working longer hours, they get a relatively lower rate of pay. For the catering industry, half of the workers, that is the median wage, or the median working hours is not more than 54 hours, earning $10,500. So just imagine, on average, 9 hours per day, and surprisingly, he makes $10,500 only, and then for the 2 years in a row, we don't see a lot of difference. Now, if we don't make adjustments to the statutory minimum wage and if we don't introduce standard working hours, there won't be any improvement. If the government turns a deaf ear to this, there won't be improvement at all. I don't want to put any question to the departments because it is not that the data is not clear to us. It's clear. And we can see the various percentages. So I put this question to the government. Is it that you think that this is reasonable and acceptable? Long working hours, low wage levels? I think it's for the Commissioner or the Labour Department. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. For statutory minimum wage, the purpose of the legislation is to reduce and remove excessively low wages as far as possible without jeopardizing their job opportunities and without jeopardizing our long-term competitiveness. But still, Mr. Chairman, the SMW cannot help. 10,500. It was already above the SMW. At the time, was $30 only. So it didn't offer much help. It was already over the minimum wage. I think we need to admit the fact that the minimum wage rate is indeed too low. Another problem is the excessively long working hours. You have to understand that we're talking about the median working hours. In other words, half of the employees are worse than this. You have to bear this point in mind. So if you allow this to continue, you are just turning a blind eye to it, and then the data will become meaningless. So, Commissioner or the Labour Department, how are you going to solve the problem of long working hours and low income levels? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've addressed the point concerning statutory minimum wage for standard working hours. Indeed, working hours is a very complex issue with far-reaching implications. We mustn't underestimate the impact on employers, employees, society, and economy as a whole if we are to legislate to regulate working hours. Last time we came here, please don't repeat what you have said. We understand that. Now my question is the government going to do something about it? We've been talking about standard working hours for a long time. If you keep on saying that there will be far-reaching implications, then the annual survey is superfluous. Mr. Leung, please don't make life difficult for her. I don't think she can give an answer to you. I'm not making life difficult for her. The facts tell us, the figures tell us the facts. I think you should have spent more time to talk about the low-paying industries. You've only got the median figures for us. Now, we want to know how long the working hours are. For the catering industry, 54 hours being the median. What about the distribution? How many are working 52 or 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day? So be more detailed, more specific. Can you consider that? Next, Mr. Yu Kwok Him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I share the concern of members who spoke before me. The survey has shown that 64,300 workers are working 72 hours or more. On average, they have to work 14.4 hours a day. Most of them are found in cleansing, security, and property management. I believe some from the high-income occupations. So it isn't always the case that long working hours coupled with low wage levels. But then 14 hours is quite usual for the low-income occupations or the low-pay occupations. Now, if on average you work 14 hours a day, what's the impact on the low-income earners? What is the impact on the family? So would you consider restricting the number of working hours? But of course, it has to do with the wage. So would you start studying this matter? Another question about the wage of male employees. 16,000 or so for 16,500 for male employees, 12,700 for female employees. But of course, sometimes a female employee may leave the workforce to start a family and give birth, and then they'll come back, and then they have to take a lower level of income. Are you going to provide specific help to the female employees? Could you answer the questions? I'll tackle the question of working hours. Now, 72 hours or more per week. Most of them are in the security, property management, and cleansing industries. Generally speaking, most of them work 6 days a week. In other words, 10 hours per day. Other than the so-called low-pay occupations, you also find such number of working hours in other occupations, like the high-pay occupations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Yip, for your proposals and your questions. Now, working hours. The Standard Working Hours Committee is still carrying on with its work. Hopefully, they can make recommendations in a report to the government in the first quarter next year, so that we will be getting a recommendation about the way forward. The second question was about the female workforce. The government has done a lot of work, hoping that we can facilitate the participation of the female employees, and then we can release their potential. Say, for example, childcare is an area that we have worked on. How are you going to help the employees who rejoin the workforce after taking care of the children? Are you providing any substantive help so that their wage rates will not be kept at a level lower than their male counterparts? Anything from the Bureau or from the department? Well, for the wage differential, I think just now the Census and Statistics Department has explained there are other reasons to explain the wage differential. It is not just because of the sex. The last to ask questions, Mr. Lam Kwok Hong. Mr. Chairman, when we passed the legislation for statutory minimum wage, I already pointed out that without any regulation on standard working hours, minimum statutory wage on its own would not be scientific. It is simple. Nowadays, during the Occupy movement, there was a tram driver who was a member of the FTU. He was really upset. He said that the trams could not have a smooth ride, and he could not have overtime allowance, and he had to get $2,000 to $3,000 less a month, and so he found it hard to support the family. He criticized the Occupy movement. On the face of it, it's not reasonable. This is because if you expect an employee to have 2 to 3 hours overtime so that he will have sufficient overtime allowance to support his family, then it is not good. At the time we introduced statutory minimum wage, we didn't assume how many hours one had to work, and we thought that $30 would be fine. I mentioned the point many times, and it has been turned out to be true. A large number of employees have to count on their overtime allowance to support their family, to make a living. What is even worse is that without standard working hours, it means that you toil a lot, but then you don't get paid for your overtime work. What sort of government have we got here? You did this at the time of legislating for statutory minimum wage, so sowed the seeds of trouble. And according to Chen Yunhan, I don't think the government should be supported again. Well, it is really mind-boggling. So may I ask you this question? When will you introduce the legislation for standard working hours? First question. Second question is, have you also introduced a corresponding increase in the statutory minimum wage? Because if they work 60 hours, they have enough income. If they work 40 hours, then no overtime pay. So probably the employer will get another employee. Now the employer will very well say that if there is a standard number of working hours, overtime pay will break it. But Michael Tian said that the range is going to break the business. Would you leave enough time for them to answer? No need. Well, Ms. Chen hasn't sort of given a decisive answer on the question of election or re-election. Well, for the standard working hours, you're saying that there should be the contract working hours or the agreed working hours. But then the contracts are really bad. Do you have a timetable as to when you will complete the task? Are you going to examine all the contracts and then you try to upload the non-compliant contracts? Are you going to start such a campaign? All right, we have to move on and we go to the next agenda item. What about Finland, Denmark, and other countries, do we have the same for the wage of male and female employees having such a differential? Ms. Chen, sometimes when we go to the relevant websites, it might not be easy to get the information. So sometimes we have to write to their governments to get the information. All right? Government policy relating to the outsourcing of service contract and protection for staff of public libraries, service contractors. So please take a look of the papers from the administration. We have this paper, CB bracket 1260/14 to 15 bracket 05 from the government, and the secretariat has given us a background brief, CB bracket 1260/14 to 15 bracket 06. I would like to welcome the public officers who are here to explain the matter to us. We have Ms. Winky Wong, PO Tender FSTB, Ms. Lau, Assistant Director Libraries and Development LCSD, Mrs. Mary Zhang, Chief Librarian from LCSD, Ms. Melody Luke, Assistant Commissioner for Labor, and Mr. Sam Sum, Senior Labor Officer from the Labor Department. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Would there be an introduction from the government first? Thank you, Chairman. Maybe I should give an introduction to the outsourcing arrangement of the government first. The government provides public services mainly through civil servants, especially those with a long-term need, new services or statutory duties in nature. So most of the time these will be provided through civil service, but for time-limited services and seasonal services, the government would recruit non-civil service contract staff to provide the services. And we have also been outsourcing government services for the purpose of providing some public services. The departments will look at their operational needs, cost effectiveness, and whether the services rendered are core business of the department before deciding on whether to outsource the services. If it's decided to outsource the services, of course, they have to set up an effective monitoring mechanism to monitor the performance of the contractor, and also to make sure that the outsource contract is complied with. That's all for my part. Any supplement? I would like to say something about library. Please speak to the mic. I'll start again. I would like to say a few words about library services of the LCSD and how library services are provided through the outsourcing arrangement. We have civil servants and NCSC staff in our public libraries to provide services to the public, and LCSD also recruits provides an arrangement whereby additional manpower can be employed. The efficiency units conducted a review on the efficiency of services provided by the library services. In line with this the recommendations, we have made use of more automation. We also employ or buy services for the services such as library services, putting the books back to the shelves, and the LCSD has also introduced a new arrangement in the past years. We have done some tendering services and also employ contractors, and the contractor is required to provide a certain number of man hours and necessary manpower. All these contract clauses are standard clauses. We require the contractor to enter into employment contracts with the staff, and with certain clauses to be incorporated in the contract, and the contractor is required to comply with labor laws. If the contractor cannot comply with the contract, for example, they cannot provide a sufficient number of manpower, then there will be deductions from the contract sum, so as to make sure that the contractor would provide the necessary manpower for our libraries. We have also a monitoring mechanism to ensure performance of the contractor. In a recent case, one of the contractors who is responsible for a number of contracts providing manpower to public libraries, the contractor defaulted, and wages were owed, and the contractor has to fulfill its legal obligations to pay its employees. This is an isolated case. The LCSD has already taken measures to minimize the impact on library services. We are also concerned about the welfare of employees of the contractor. We have met with them, and we understand that they would like to get some assistance from us concerning the record of work hours. These contracts have already expired, and we have used some short-term service procurement contracts, which will take effect in May. We've asked the contractors to contact the Labor Department to recruit the necessary manpower, and the recruitment has already begun. We've also been trying to recruit part-time workers for sorting and shelving work of libraries. We have started the interviews, and the part-time staff will start to assume office next month, and some of them were previously employees of the defaulting contractor. For the arrangements provided by the Labor Department, I'll defer to my colleague here. We have provided assistance to 420 employees who have all registered with us for their wage recovery cases. We receive information from the contractor. The information is provided in detail. We can ascertain the amount owed to the employees. We're going to do some matching of information, and if the employer and the employees do not dispute the information, we would refer their cases to the wages and the protection of wages in insolvency fund, because the contractor is now in an insolvency process, and so we'll assist the employees to get the protection under the ordinance. We provide all employees with the protection accorded to them under the law. For example, after the contract has come to an end, the employer is required to pay all wages and other money owed in 7 days. We would make sure, we would ascertain whether the employer is in compliance with this. If without any reasonable excuse the employer has failed to do so, we will carry out the investigations, and if there is sufficient evidence, we will prosecute the employer or those responsible for the wages in arrears. All right. This is now the Q&A session. 4 minutes each. Mr. Kwok Wai-Keung. Thank you. So the government officials from the departments have said that under certain circumstances, services will be outsourced, for example, seasonal work, short-term work. But this time, these library assistants are not providing time-limited services or seasonal services. They're responsible for sorting and shelving in libraries, maintenance of facilities, and so on and so forth. All these are needed for the long term. How come you can classify these duties as time-limited or seasonal, and that the services can be outsourced? Although the libraries are provided to the public, it seems that the government regards itself as the principal contractor, and your contractor is the subcontractor, and now there's a problem with the subcontractor, and the principal contractor refuses to take up the responsibility. Last time, I applauded the remarks by your commissioner that you only outsource services, you don't outsource responsibility. But it seems that you are trying to outsource the responsibility this time. In early March, the contractor defaulted. And the payment that the LCSD would give them for February was not yet granted at that point. We asked LCSD whether the money can be used to pay the contractor's employees. And the LCSD resorted to various excuses that they could not use the money to pay the contractor's staff. So the department was concerned about protection for LCSD, but not protection for the contractor staff. And now the contractor's employees will have to go to the court or to go to the protection of wages on insolvency fund. What about the payment or the money that you are supposed to pay the contractor? What would happen to the amount to be paid? And you are also saying that there are part-time library assistants which would assume their post in next Friday. How many of those former contract staff employees be absorbed through this channel? The first question is about the higher services of libraries. As I've said, we have 60 libraries. They are core services. And the services are provided by the civil servants. As for sorting and shelving, we rely on our contractors to provide the service. So there's a division of labor. As I've said, the efficiency units suggested that for this part of our services, we should outsource the services to contractors. For this particular contractor in question, and since the contract has been suspended, and we need to work out the amount the contractor owes the government, and therefore we cannot really utilize the money payable to the contractor under the previous contract, or to use the money to pay its employees.
Yes, Mr. Tang Ka-Piu. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't understand. Are you scaling down the library services? Are you going to close libraries one after another? Or in a few years down the road, you no longer need people to shelf the books, and there's no need for manpower to manage the libraries. So how come that you're contracting out the service? Unless you say that this is indeed the case, then you can say that you are justified to contract out the service. So it is shameless for you to make such a decision. For the February payment, it hasn't been given to the contractor. The contractor has defaulted. The contractor has not paid the library staff. So it is very bad for you not to pay up the contract staff members. Have you finished your questions? You have money for February. You haven't paid the boss. Why don't you pay the employees? Would it be Ms. Lau? Thank you, Mr. Tang, for your question. Let me try to explain. Please move closer to the mic. Yes, I'll try to speak up. For the money involved, there is a deposit, and since the contract has been suspended and there's been a breach of the contract, in the month of March, on the 6th, services were suspended. We had to get people to fill the gap, and we had to pay overtime, and we had to award mini contracts. So extra expenses have been incurred. A number of contracts have been involved, and the total sum is quite huge. So if we are to utilize the February payment to deal with the problem, but in fact we don't have the discretion to take out that sum of money to do so. You see that there isn't any discretion, or have you already spent all the money? You don't have the discretion or the money spent on anything, on something else. They finished the work for February. In February, you didn't have to ask for external help. Ms. Lau, would you like to continue? Yes. As I have said, for this contract, or for contracts as a whole, we ask the contractor to perform the duties as an employer. They haven't. I think you should do it on their behalf, because after all, it is public service and you have 400 employees involved. Let her finish first, Mr. Tang. Yes, I do appreciate. For employees, they have served the employer, but after all, we do not have a employment relationship with the contract staff. In this particular case, there was already a breach of contract in the several contracts involved. We have to do some calculations. We have to look at the money owed to us. We are still working on the calculations. Maybe at the end of the day, they may still owe us money. According to the terms of the contract, we are making the calculations. Therefore, we cannot touch the sum of money involved and pay the contractor for February. Well, I think in the construction industry, the principal contractor will be asked to pay on behalf of the subcontractor. We're supposed to have Mr. Poon, but then he swapped the slot with Ms. Chen. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Poon, because I have to rush to another function. So thank you, Mr. Poon, for swapping with me. I think you are too rigid. I think the FSTP is too rigid. Such loopholes have emerged in the past. Mr. Tang has already said that for the construction industry, if the subcontractor or subcontractor defaults, then the principal contractor will take up the responsibility. Why don't you do the same? And this is not the first time that we see something similar happening. Since 1997, the government has been taking the lead to contract out the service. Civil service work has been contracted out, so you are following the bad example of the business sector. Now, workers are getting a very low pay, and you have to be held accountable and responsible. For the officer from the FSTB, if you just try to pay lip service to us, it is meaningless. Can you not promise to take the case back to the Director of the Bureau instead of dodging the issue? It's outrageous, Chair. The Chair is not outrageous. So, what is your answer to my question? Loopholes are left unaddressed. The government taking the lead to contract out the service, dragging down the wage levels. Are you going to face the problems? I hope you'll answer the series of questions asked. Who's going to ask? Of course, someone from the FSTB. Are you naming Ms. Wong to give you an answer? Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Chen. We know that for works contracts, if the principal contractor cannot pay the workers, the government can pay on behalf. Well, the labor dispute has to be settled first, and if necessary, they have to go to the labor tribunal or await a court order before we can do anything. Please don't be so inflexible. You are dragging your feet. It seems that it has got nothing to do with you. Try to imagine that you are a worker affected and your wages are not paid. They want to be paid. They want their wages to be paid. It is an imminent problem. Ms. Wong, after the government has paid on behalf of the principal contractor, the government will also go after the contractor to get reimbursement. I don't care. Now we are saying that there is the system, there are loopholes. Are you telling us that you will allow the LCSD to pay on behalf of the contractor and then you will go after the contractor to get reimbursement? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Ms. Lau, the Assistant Director, has said, well, there are certain terms of the contract and perhaps there will be problems with the feasibility. Mr. Tang has criticized the Bureau. I think we should reprimand the Bureau for beating around the bush. It is already a real issue. Now, for the service to be contracted out, I think the FSTB should be criticized. The grassroots workers have no bargaining power, and you're turning a deaf ear to their hardship. I have to rush to another function, otherwise I'll move a motion to reprimand the government or to censure the government. Now, we are talking about employees who are the employees of a contractor for the government. They are in a worse situation than the workers of a subcontractor or contractor of a public works project. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, libraries are the most sacred place. We read books there. Students go there to read. Now, for this temple of wisdom and knowledge, and yet you are going to do this which is so cruel to the workers. We're supposed to go to libraries to read books to gain knowledge. Now, the employees are there to help the readers to read books, and now you're exploiting the workers. Now, in the construction industry, there are just so many cases of arrears of wages, and I have helped many workers to go after the ASD. The ASD on behalf of the government won't pay, and in fact it's the principal contractor that will be made to pay up. Now, for the libraries, they are grand buildings. I saw this corporate in the library. Well, the virtues have been emphasized. And then it seems that one word was missing from the corporate. And then there was a worker who was moving the books that was blocking the one of the words of the corporate. Well, I think you work for the others. You don't work for your personal gain when you treasure your virtues. Now, in the past, you emphasize the efficiency. Now, of course, in the case of lifeguards, fewer people go to swim in winter, so you can justify that there is a seasonal fluctuation in the demand for the service, but not so in the case of libraries. So you are being shameless, and so you will become invincible. So you are invincible because you are shameless by ignoring the basic virtues. It is a matter of accountability. Who thought that it's seasonal in terms of the demand for service? Probably we have got more users, more readers during the summer vacation. I don't think we ever get a period when there are fewer readers going to the libraries. For the LCSD, you have done a poor job. And then for those who supported the abolition of the municipal councils, they should jump into the sea. In the past, the urban council and the regional council would oversee the libraries. And the councillors would say that they had the funding from the rates, and that they would tell the government not to be so unkind to their staff. I think we need to filibuster. Ms. Chen asked who conceived the idea of contracting out the service. It was Anthony Leung. He used to speculate on behalf of the foreign investors, and so he tried to find ways to cut the cost. Would you like to spend all your 4 minutes on criticizing them? Well, I think it's a matter of the officials being the boss. So the officials can have the final say. And it means that they will not be fair to the employees. They won't pay the employees. Now you're even telling us that there are certain contractual terms. Why don't you include in the contract that workers must be paid immediately? Why you have the bond, you have the deposit. I think you can find the money from the bond to pay the workers. I think they have hurt you. Mr. Lee Cheuk-yen. Mr. Chairman, we've always been saying that the employers are unscrupulous, the principal contractor is unscrupulous. Now in this case, it's the government that is unscrupulous. I think it's simple. Why don't you pay the workers directly? You can pay the workers first, and then you go after the contractor for reimbursement. Workers need money to support their family. Let me ask this question again. It seems that you were aware that you could have asked the contractor for the money to be reimbursed. So why haven't you done so? Why don't you pay the workers directly and then get reimbursement from the contractor? Would you like to get an answer to this question first? Government. Ms. Lau. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your question. Well, according to the terms of the contract, the payment for service can only be paid to the contractor. But then the contracts have been suspended. They have been terminated. So we have to make calculations. We have to find out about the money owed by the contractor to us. Even if the contractor owes us money, we cannot use the money with us to pay the workers. Now you have got thousands of billions of dollars. You would rather sit on them and let the workers suffer from arrears of wages. Do some soul searching and try to see if you are being fair to the workers. It's something very simple, and yet you can't do it. You won't do it. Of course, it is not your own decision. It is the FSTB. Would you agree with me that you should have paid the workers directly? FSTB? Yes, FSTB. Any answers? Well, in theory, according to the law, the employer, yes, of course, I know about the employer duties. Well, in the case of a private organization, I would have already occupied the organization and I would have sealed off the construction site.
Well, the employer has a legal obligation to pay his employees. For these employees, the government is not their employer. In other words, if that's the logic, the principal contractor will not have to pay workers of subcontractors. But that's what we have in the construction industry. Well, maybe that's because there were many similar cases in the construction industry, and that's why we have to complain now. Well, the paper is a piece of rubbish. According to the FSTB, all you want to do is to follow the labor legislation. I want to ask a question, and it's not just about the LCSD. When the FSTB procures services, are you going to offer anything better than the employment ordinance? For example, would you ask the contractor to increase wages for the employees once every year? And every time the contract expires, the contractor should pay severance pay instead of asking the workers to resign. 2 questions. Annual wage increase is the first question. For wage is determined by the market. And on the question of severance payment, there are rules and regulations and rules concerning when severance payment is payable. If an employer tries to avoid paying the severance payment by using certain loopholes, we ask the Labor Department to investigate. Mr. Poon Siu Ping, trade unions have been criticizing the outsourcing arrangement because labor welfare is sacrificed, and now this is a so-called an isolated case, but some 400 employees are involved. We have been told that the employer, the contractor, had to fulfill his obligations under the contract. But I think the government is also at fault because of the lack of proper monitoring. The government should review the arrangement and cancel the outsourcing arrangement. The LCSD is operated by the LCSD, but you still have an arrangement whereby core services are provided by civil servants, and there are others. So the government should cancel the outsourcing arrangements. And now I have a question specifically for the Labor Department. Is that you are helping the contractors, employees, and you help them recover the sums owed. Have you prosecuted the contractor, that is the employer of these employees? what's the progress so far? On the question of prosecution first, after this case came to our attention, our labor inspectors did carry out inspections to the relevant locations, and then we contacted the employees, hundreds of them, because their wages were not paid punctually, and we asked if any one of them would be willing to act as witnesses to in a case against the employer. We have actually gathered evidence in certain cases. We are still considering the way forward. In other words, chances are that you are going to prosecute the employer. We have gathered some evidence. We are considering whether to prosecute the employer. A question for the LCSD. Were you able to discover that it would be a problem with the employer because he was not doing his job through your monitoring mechanism? Previously, the contractor's performance was all right, but starting the beginning of the year, since he has several contracts with us, so we asked him to improve. But it came as a sudden surprise. It's in March that this happened. So you did not ask them to file returns and reports to you regularly? Yes, we do ask for reports to be furnished, and we also had meetings with them to ascertain whether there was any difficulty faced by the contractor. Any follow-up from you, Mr. Poon? Well, originally there's a motion that we had to handle, but we don't have a quorum, so we cannot deal with that now. We have a second round now. 2 minutes, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. So obviously we are talking to a wall, and the question of the matter is clear for all to see. The government did not have a good monitoring mechanism for such outsourced services, and you only care about money. In the whole scenario, you just wanted to make sure that the government would get the compensation, but not you do not care about the protection to the contractors and employees. And you haven't answered my question as regards how many of these former employees of the contractor have been recruited to work for you now. For new contracts, can we have this payment in lieu provision or surrogation of the right? That is the surrogation rights in 43C in the employment ordinance be extended to government outsourcing contracts? We are now interviewing candidates for part-time positions. According to my colleagues, there are 3 or 4 former employees of this contractor applying for the post, but we don't know how many eventually will take up these posts. We would incorporate more clauses in future contracts to ensure better monitoring of the contractor's performance. As for extending Section 43C of the employment ordinance to our contracts, is something beyond our jurisdiction. How many people do we need for a quorum? Maybe we should ask Ms. Chen Yunhan to come back to join us. I want to get an answer from the FSTP or the Labor Department. We are having gone through so much, and even with a low unemployment rate of 3.3%, we still have this case. What about when the economy is doing less well? Are you willing to extend Section 43C of the Employment Ordinance to protect employees of government contracts? As members are aware, in the Employment Ordinance, Section 43C only covers the construction industry. And if we are not talking about private, the private sector, and if we are going to extend this to government departments, we are not able to come up with such a policy. Well, it's the Employment Ordinance, so the power to start a review rests with the Labor and Welfare Bureau. At least you should cover all your outsourced agreements. But these contracts are not under the Labor Department. We want to amend the law so that the relevant provision can cover employees of government contracts. Are you going to review the Employment Ordinance? Well, as it stands, the provision only covers the construction industry. And if you want to cover private organizations, it will not just affect the government, it will affect all private companies. I don't think they can answer our questions in 2 minutes. They are not prepared for any improvement measures. Well, that's obvious. I would like the FSTP to get a comprehensive review done and come back to tell us what can be done in 2 months. So whether you are willing to, for example, whether you're willing to pay the defaulting contractors' employees, just like the construction industry, and also in the contract there should be provisions for the annual increase of wages, and thirdly, upon expiry of the contract, the contractor should pay severance payment to his employees. Can you promise to do all these 3 things? We can conduct a review. I just want to give you a reminder. Well, we fought for a long time so that staff under the outsourced contracts would be working 8 hours per day. So along the same line, we'd like to see a review conducted so that these employees would get better protection. Maybe say 3 months down the road, we can have another discussion. Labor Department representative, can you take appropriate follow-up action within the government? The policy on government outsourcing contracts is does not rest entirely within the ambit of the Labor Department. Then which department is responsible for that? The Labor Department has the ambit to amend the Employment Ordinance, but for the policy on procurement of services, it rests with the FSTP. Okay, so let's ask the FSTP representative to look into this. Table before you, members, is a motion moved without notice by Mr. Tan Ka-pil, seconded by Kwok Wai-keung. Over to you, Mr. Kwok, on the motion. Well, this panel urges the government to comprehensively review the existing outsourcing arrangement of the government, and also to extend the provisions in the employment ordinance for the extension of the payment of wages in arrears for the construction industries, so that they would be applied to outsourced service employees of government contracts, so as to enhance protection for workers. For those in favor of this motion, please raise your hands. So all of them, all of you, 6, and I don't think I need to ask who are not in favor of this. So it's carried unanimously by all 6 members here. So I believe this strong message of ours has been received by the government. We have nothing under AOB, so meeting's adjourned.